I've got it all figured out. We're going live in Facebook at the same time. I figured, why not? Okay. So, how are you, Tammy? Are you doing well? Now, I don't know if anybody else will actually be joining us here in the live stream, but the great thing is if you want to take yourself off of mute and ask direct questions without needing to type them, by all means, you can certainly do that. And if you would rather just type them, I've got the chat box up over here so I can see them. So either way it works. All right. So I'm just going to go back to the group for 1 second. Just 1 second. Do I look and see? Comme ça. Ah, comme ça. There we go. Okay. So without further ado, oh, it's 4:58. We're going to do it without further ado. Good afternoon, everybody. How are you today? Thank you so much for coming. I hope that you actually get a lot of value out of what we're going to talk about today, because what is the number one thing that most people hate about selling? That's right, you guessed it. It's sales. So, sorry, it's sales. What's the number one thing they hate about sales, Danielle? Sales. Well, that could actually be true as well, but I think that really what most people are, what they dislike the most is actually the objections, because you know your product really well. Perhaps you even know your service really well. Maybe you even know all the features and advantages and benefits, but when it comes to actually having a connection with somebody and actually trying to get them to want the product or the solution that you're offering, that can be really challenging. So today we're going to talk about the objection, I need to think about it. And I've actually written myself a whole bunch of notes here. So if I look down from time to time, I hope you'll forgive me, because I wanted to make sure that I was giving you, absolutely the best information I could. And so I had to do a lot of thinking about that, because now I've changed the group name. Now it is Online Female Coaches and Entrepreneurs. And the reason for that is, as many of you may not know, I'm also in network marketing. It's a side gig that I do that helps to just kind of, give you little frills in life. And so I do have a product-based business as well. And many of the people that I have in my friends list and on my connections are also in network marketing. And so because of that, we are all product-based in that sense. And I figured, you know what, the same principles apply whether you're selling a product or selling a service. The same emotions are involved. Of course, the higher the price on the product that you're selling, well, frankly, the more the emotion becomes involved, doesn't it? Because now we're asking people to part with a larger amount of money. So I've actually prepared a presentation for today, and with your patience and persistence, I'm actually going to share my screen. And if you've ever attended any of these training sessions with me before, you know that I'm actually not that technically adept when it comes to moving around in Zoom. I'm very much an in-person kind of trainer, so bear with me for this for a little bit if you don't mind. But today we're talking about objections. And so I saw this and I thought, that's actually very, very appropriate. I think that what happens for a lot of us when we get into sales conversations is we do get that anxious feeling that causes stress. You can feel the tension in your body sometimes, even because you're just waiting for the no, you're waiting for the objection. And that in itself can actually almost create objections. And the reason is you're not being fully present to the person in front of you and really hearing and understanding what it is that they're asking for, what it is that is troubling them, what the pain or the problem is that they need solved. So my first piece of advice for everybody is do what you can to calm down before you go into them. And if you feel like, so let's imagine for a moment that part of your strategy is actually reaching out to people in the DMs, and I hope it is, because if you're going to use social media, the whole point is to be social, right? So creating conversations and connections with people is going to be really important to your whole process. But if you've got any kind of resistance going into it and you're creating any, if the resistance could just be, I'm afraid they're going to say no. Oh, I'm just bracing for the no. I've had 12 no's today, and this one's going to be another one. So that attitude that we go into things with, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I'm a big fan of Henry Ford's quote, whether you think you can do a thing or whether you think you cannot, you're right. And that really is about, good morning, Jody, that really is about all of that attitude going into it, right? So what is your mental state when you go into it? So try to be calmer, even if you've had 50 no's. Keep saying to yourself, this one's going to be a yes. This one's going to be a yes. This one's going to be a yes. And that helps to keep your system down, right? You're triggering your parasympathetic nervous system, but at the same time gets your motivation and your enthusiasm up. And so there's that combination, this little magic combination of calm and fun and, confident that we want to try to achieve. But we'll talk about that in another session, not this one. Today we're going to talk about objections specifically. And as I had mentioned, we're going to talk about the specific objection. I need to think about it. So my first little thing that I want to share with you is actually a video. And what I want to just quickly double check is I want to make sure, that you guys are going to get the sound. So I'm going to reshare for 1 second, make sure I've checked that. And here we go. So this is just a very quick little video. And what it's really talking about is whose goals are you trying to achieve when you're in a sales conversation? Whose goals are you actually pursuing when you're in there? You may need to turn your volume up a little bit. I don't know how loud this is. Are you ready?
Most of us have been on a trip or a journey, right? Think back of a time when you ran into a roadblock. Maybe it wasn't an actual roadblock, but it was a hurdle, something that prevented you from moving forward at a good pace towards your final destination or your goal. Did you run out of gas? Or maybe the weather was not cooperating, it was raining outside, maybe you deviated off course and you forgot to follow your map or your GPS. Did you not prepare adequately? Did you not pay attention to your surroundings? Well, you know what? Sales is that way, and we all start off with the same goal, to close and to gain the commitment from the buyer. But things happen along the way. We hit roadblocks. We run into obstacles just when we think we're almost there. Most sales textbooks call these objections. The dictionary defines an objection as an expression or feeling of disapproval or opposition, a reason for disagreeing. I see them as opportunities to solve buyers' problems. I like to think of objections as falling into two categories: the uncontrollables and the controllables. Sometimes objections can be prevented and sometimes they can't, just because unexpected things happen with the buyer that you can't control. For example, I don't have a budget left. Emergency situations have come up and I can't focus my time on this issue right now. We are going through a merger or an acquisition, or we're making changes to our organizational structure and the decision-making process is changing. As a salesperson, you don't have control over these things. It's possible that you can assist by offering options, but you may have to accept the fact that it may not be the right time for the buyer to buy from you. What do? Do you leave the door open so you can come back when it is the right time? Of course. Now, before discussing how to overcome a controllable objection, let me start off by asking you a question. In the sales process, whose goals are you pursuing? Yours or the buyer's? In my experience, this is one of the main reasons, if not the most common reason, why a salesperson doesn't close a sale. We tend to focus on the reasons why the buyer doesn't agree with our proposal, as opposed to really focusing on solving that buyer's problem. 9 times out of 10, we run into a hurdle because we haven't taken the time to really listen to the buyer, to clearly assess the buyer's situation and then validate our understanding of it. So here are some guidelines I'd like to propose to you while in the objection handling process. First, be clear on the buyer's issues. If you don't understand, circle back and ask questions until you do. Secondly, be clear on the objective of the sales call. It's not always about closing during that call. It could be about introducing the buyer to a product or to your company or just getting to know them. Third, be aware of the buying signals, both verbal and nonverbal. There are times when the buyer's ready before we ask for the sale, but we just keep going. And this is discouraging to the buyer. It bores them. They want to get to the end result. Remain upbeat and positive is our fourth guideline. Smile throughout the objection handling process. This is an opportunity. Most successful people always smile. 5. Get many commitments along the way. Paraphrase your understanding of the issues and doubts and continuously confirm them using trial close questions. Number 6, be confident but humble. Accept that the buyer won't always agree with you. And lastly, focus on the solution and less on the close. Always look for ways to help the buyer. Now, I'm a firm believer of always being proactive versus reactive. And if we were to just spend more time up front, really understanding the issues, we would be in a much better position to respond to the doubts and fears of the buyer. To the salesperson, the objection is a hurdle, but to the buyer, it's a risk. The salesperson has an opportunity to minimize that risk.
Well, there you go. So what I want to talk about next, and if you've been in any of my trainings before, we have talked about the buying decision process. And welcome, Teresa. I see you there. We did
Hi, thank you.
In there. I'm not sure what's happening. I don't know if she'll be back, but I'm going to keep going, just so you know. And Sonia, I did see you there. Hello. Okay, so as the woman in the video has explained, really, you've got to be focusing on the buyer in this case. So if you sell a product, then you're focusing on the features and benefits and how that's going to solve your prospect's potential issue. If you sell a service, then you're trying to solve it in a different way, only because tangible versus intangible, but you still talk about it the same way. But the problem you're trying to solve is obviously using a different solution. One's a product, one's a service. You are the product when you are the service provider, right? So when we talk about buying decisions, there's a few steps to it. The first and foremost, and I've talked about this time and again, they must recognize that they have a need, that they've got a problem of some sort. So I can give an example. When I lost a lot of weight, I had a lot of skin that made me feel disgusting. And so I needed a product that was going to help me to firm that skin back up. And I had lots of options available and had to do some research. So imagine somebody had a beautiful firming cream that also had collagen in it, and they could talk to me about that. There's one thing. Imagine I am not making enough sales in my business, and I'm not really sure what the problem is. I just know that if I don't start making sales, I may be forced to go back to a 9-to-5 job because, you know, I've got to pay the bills. So I have an option or an opportunity to either go back to work or to actually invest in myself and increase my skill set. But I have to recognize that I have a problem that needs a solution first. That's always the first step in any buying decision. The second one is that I actually start searching for information. And these two things are happening before a person ever has contact with you. And everybody that's in this group is an online provider. So whether it's a product or whether it's a service, we are all online providers. So these are people who are actually doing their research before they even make contact with us. Sometimes when you're really good at doing your marketing, you can actually point out to people that they have a problem. So you have some influence on them recognizing their problem, but it's indirect because they won't reach out to you until you've actually identified for them that they have the problem. So the second thing is they search for information. The third, they start doing an evaluation. They're measuring A against B, right? We all do this, and in our decision-making training, we actually talked about pros and cons lists as one of the options. We all do that mentally, and that's what the evaluation process that most buyers are going through. Some, like analytic types, go through a little bit more of a deep dive into their decision making, and their metrics and their evaluation process is perhaps a little bit more weighty. But for the most part, people are saying, well, I needed to do A, B, and C. I also want it to not cost me that much. I want to get it for the best price. I want to get it the fastest. So I needed to firm up my skin. It would be great if it could help my joints, right? All of the things that, if it could be a 5-in-1, that would mean I'd save money, save time, right? So they are looking for their best bang for their buck. And what I'm hoping that you are trying to do for them is that you're trying to show them why your product or service is the best bang for their buck. It does not mean that you offer the best price. It means that you offer the best outcomes, right? So when we're talking about that, we want to talk about value. So the next step that they're going through in their mind, now they're actually making a choice and they're making a purchase. But the process actually continues beyond that, because once they've actually made their purchase, they actually start doing another evaluation. Is this doing what I thought it was going to do? And earlier today, Jody put up a comment on a post where I was asking for ideas about handling objections. And Jody said, well, what about the objection of what if it doesn't work, or will it work? Right? So that's another one. And I thought, maybe I'll change out one of the next couple of days. I won't change out price. I know that's the one everybody's looking forward to. But they're evaluating whether or not it's actually meeting the need that they had originally expected it to meet, right? Is it solving the problem the way they thought it would? And the more costly your product is, the more intent they are on evaluating that, because most people don't like to part with large sums of money without believing they're getting what they paid for back. This is just, this is the standard belief system that most of us have, and it's a very old school belief system. Perhaps some of the more new age people in the world are saying, well, you know, the whole idea of manifestation and, you know, you've got to give to receive. If you believe in that, then wonderful, but don't assume your client does. Okay, so you've got to remember where they are. And that was the reason I wanted to show that video, because Jody explains it. I believe that lady's name was Jody, or Nancy. It was Nancy. She explains it so well when she's talking about paying attention to your buyer's needs. And the final thing they're doing is they're making a decision about whether they will stop using that product or whether they will repurchase. Our hope is that they are going to repurchase. Again, if it's a product, repurchasing is good for our income stream, but it's also good for us in the service sense. And our real hope here at this stage is that we've created such a raving fan that they will now go on and tell others about it. So this is where we want to really get our raving fans going and get them referring others to us, okay? So there really are only 4 kinds of objections. No matter what industry you're in, 4 kinds of objections. I don't need it. I don't think it's worth it. Doesn't have the features I need. I don't want it. Those are it. And all of the objections actually fall into that. And I hope, I don't know if you can see my screen there. And if you're on Facebook or on your phone, you won't be able to see it as well. But these are where they're happening. And the important thing I want to point out is this right here. Normally, we think that objections happen after we've said, so would you like to go ahead? They don't always. They quite often will be coming up earlier in the conversation. So you have an opportunity to help relieve that buyer's concerns throughout the entire conversation. However, if you are prone to just glazing over those objections, what's happening is that they compound on one another. So one objection actually compounds and builds up into a large pile of objections. So we'll call it an objection stack, okay? So the next thing we want to talk about is the specific ways that you speak to objections, you have two options. You can come at it from the perspective of overcoming it, which is almost like challenge accepted, right? It's as though somebody's come to you and they're saying, I've got some resistance. And you go, great, I'm going to overcome it. And it's almost combative. Handling on the other side, though, is a little bit more negotiative. So I've put up kind of the how they're a little bit different here on the screen. I'm sure you can read that. But argumentative versus resolving, defensiveness versus openness, creating additional client demands. And that's the issue when people talk about overcoming objections. It's almost like it's a challenge, like I said, a bit of a game. And you've got to pull out all the stops to try, because now it's a contest. Somebody's got to win. And that's going to be me. So if that's your attitude going into it, I think that if you have ever been in a situation where you felt like you were being pushed, I think you would, if you ask that salesperson directly how they see objections, I would venture to guess that they will say that they see them as something to overcome. There you go. And then down at the bottom, you see relinquishing. So it's a contest. Somebody's got to win, where handling is really much more collaborative. So that's our goal, is to be collaborative. So I actually know 4 different methods that I teach in my mentorship program. And Teresa, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you get a lot out of this. You and I will go into this a little bit deeper in our one-to-one sessions, okay? But I've got 3 different methods. One is called the LEARN model, and I've actually created these acronyms, if you will. So bear with me. I like my acronyms. It makes things easy to remember. So that's my purpose in those. So the LEARN model is listen, empathize, ask, respond, negotiate. And you'll see that that theme continues through quite a few of them. The one that is really unique is called the 3F method. It's feel, felt, found. And that's the one we're actually going to talk about today when we talk about overcoming the objection. I need to think about it. Turn that off. And the reason is I need to think about it as an excuse. It is, I don't want to tell you my real reason. I just want to get off this call. I just want to get away from you. It's not a real objection. They just don't want to share the real one with you. And so I know that may seem actually kind of challenging to go, really? It sounds like a real objection. When I'm saying it, I mean it for real. But do you? What are you really thinking about? I'm not paying that. Oh God, that guy's a jerk. I'm not dealing with him. What are you really thinking when you say, I need to think about it? Maybe you are thinking, I've got to go home and talk to my spouse. Maybe you are thinking, I don't want to tell him I can't afford it. So saying I need to think about it is actually just this really wonderful delay tactic or exit strategy. That's really all it is. So where I want you to go from there is I want you to actually start to become that curious scientist that I've talked to you about before, where now you say, oh, well, somewhere along the way, I've not answered a question. I've not understood a concern and addressed it. Because if they continue to feel like they need to think about it, what are they thinking about? Any thoughts on what they might be thinking about?
If it was me, I'd be thinking about if I can really afford it.
Okay. So if somebody were to say to you then, Teresa, if you were to, let's do a little bit of a role play if you can. If I were to say to you, Teresa, you know, we're going to go to my skin issue thing. We're going to use the cream. Okay, the skin firming cream. And I've explained to you that it's $69 and it should last you a whole month. And I say to you, so what do you think? Would you like to go ahead and get that? And if you say to me,
I'm going to think about that.
Oh, okay. You know, Teresa, whenever I hear that, I always know that that means I haven't answered a question for you. So if you're going to be thinking about it, would you be willing to share with me what kinds of things you're going to be thinking about?
Well, I would want to think about the cost as my major issue, whether I can afford the $69 for a month, and
Okay.
whether it's going to, maybe I'm afraid it's going to do what I want it to do, and then I'm going to have to want it the next month. It's like
So it's not
compound
just a one-time investment, it's a multiple time investment that you're thinking about.
possible. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So do you see how just gently but directly and proactively saying to somebody that, I can completely, thank you so much for telling me that you need to think about it. When I hear that, I know that I've perhaps not answered all of your questions. So would you mind sharing with me what it is you're thinking about? Ask them to share it with you. I actually have a worksheet and I'm going to put this in the group. I'm probably going to put it in files. And it is, I need to think about it, but we're going to actually say instead that the true objection is something else. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to work through that little page on its own because it's very prompted. So you won't need me to specifically tell you how to use that page. Okay, so now that you know that it's the possibility of it being the price, it could be about having to buy it over and over again. Clearly there was a concern, as Jody indicated, will it work? Right, and this is true if you are selling a coaching service as well. That is something that, how can you prove it works? You have no science to back you up. So how can somebody know that it works, right? So if somebody says to you, I need to think about it, the key takeaway that I want you to have today is that that is a delay tactic and an exit strategy out of your conversation. Okay.
That's so true.
All
That's
right.
what I use it for. Yeah.
Right. And I know that I do it too. So, and this is where some of my processes and my techniques have come from, is I really analyzed my own buying behaviors and asked a lot of questions of people around me, especially different personality types. When you make a decision, when you say this, what is it that you're really thinking? When you say that, when I combine that with my almost 30 years in sales, I have a lot of trial and error that I've gone through that I can use to your advantage. There you go. So a little bit of a tricky one today in the sense that I've got you on here so that I could show you all about the process of handling objections, in the sense of making sure you are focused on the buyer and not seeing this as some kind of challenge or game that you need to win. And that actually helps to take your own tension down a little bit. There's no need to win. Don't focus on getting the sale. Instead, focus on solving their problem. If you can do that, then you're much further ahead. That being said, there are a lot of ways to phrase things that we're not going to talk about today because I've only got 3 or 4 more minutes. And I'm being very attention to detail about the time today. So we're not going to go into the specifics of that. But if you do want to know more about how I help you create your own scripts, then why not send me a direct message and we can talk about getting you on a consultation call or a discovery call, clarity call, whatever you call it. And we can talk about what some of the challenges are that you are facing. And then we can go from there. Okay. And if I didn't say this earlier, because I know I have a bad habit of forgetting. Hello, my name is Danielle. And I'm your host in the group, and I help online female coaches to stop feeling stressed and pushy in sales conversations and to make consistent sales so that they can have the life that they dream of. All righty. Any questions before I let you all go for today?
I think so.
No? Okay.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Well, I see that Jody has said that this was so helpful. I'm glad, because I felt a little bit cheeky getting you on here for one that we're not really going to handle that well because it's not a real objection. But I think that that's an important thing to learn, is that it actually isn't a genuine objection and you need to dig deeper. So this is what you're going to see is the theme throughout the next 3 or 4 days. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the feel, felt, found method. And that one is highly effective when we are talking about product sales more than service sales. But it does definitely apply to service sales as well.
Awesome.
Just a thumb, just a thumb. All right, you guys must be getting sick of seeing my McEwen sweater. I'm so sorry for that. Martin has clients and I didn't have a chance to go and change my shirt before I got here. I won't wear this one tomorrow. All right.
Hear what you wear. You wear your bathrobe.
Wonderful. All right, well, guys, I will see you again tomorrow. Jody, I will see you tomorrow in our one-on-one. Teresa, I'll see you in our one-on-one. And have a wonderful rest of your day and evening.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Bye.